Miss Vivian,
Yes po, Doc.
host ka na.
Sige po, wait lang po.
Um,
Good day, everyone. We are group number 2, and today we'll be discussing the identification of remains. So, for the table of contents, we first have the introduction, where we will briefly discuss the meaning of remains and the legal significance of the study of the skeleton. Next is we have the examination of the skeleton, where it is determined to race, age, height, build, missing bones, injuries, and gender. Next is we have who are involved in the process, oral sources, examples, and forensic specialists. Lastly, we have sample cases which are related to the identification of remains. So for introduction, the meaning of remains. The term remains typically refers to what is left of a person or thing after it has undergone a process of change, decay, destruction, or transformation. This is the general term for the meaning of remains. However, in different fields, the meaning of remains alters slightly or changes slightly, such as for human remains. In the context of forensic science, archaeology, or anthropology, human remains specifically refer to the preserved or partially preserved physical remains of a deceased person. For archaeological remains, these are the physical remnants of past human activities and civilizations. And for natural remains, this can refer to the physical remnants of plants, animals, or other organisms that have died or decomposed in natural environments. So, in short, the meaning of remains is often used in the context of studying the past, whether it is about human remains, human history, archaeology, or other fields, to describe what has been left behind or preserved from a previous time or state. The meaning of remains can also be used in a legal context when referring to evidence or physical objects related to a case or investigation. Next is we have legal significance of the study of the skeleton. So for the legal significance, we study the skeleton so that we can use it for identification. So we can identify the individuals, especially in forensic investigations. Next is so that we can learn the cause of death because skeletal analysis can help determine the cause of death, including identifying signs of trauma, fractures, or diseases that may have led to an individual's demise. And next is it can be used for criminal investigations and legal proceedings. Now we have here five um, determinations uh, for the legal significance of the study of the skeleton. First is we have determination of whether the skeleton is of human or animal origin. Number two, determination of the biological characteristics such as gender, age, race, or size. Number three, determination of the plurality of or missing bones. Number four, determination of the antemortem or postmortem injuries in the victim. Number five, determination of the duration of interment. So next we have is the examination of the skeleton. So determination whether bones are of human origin or not. So first we have the skull is very easy to distinguish as belonging to a human being. Other skeletal parts, especially if not complete, are difficult to identify. The structure of skeletons or of mammals is basically similar, but the size and form may provide clues for distinction. Findings of dental fixtures in the jaw helps in identification. Other materials such as earrings, rings, hair, and pieces of clothing may help in identification. Also, in determining whether the bones are of human origin or not, um, what they do here is whenever there are bones, they They identify it by placing and arranging the bones on a table to correspond to the human body or the skeletal system. Also, it is also difficult, or the process of identifying the bones are difficult, especially if there are only fragments of the bones that are recovered, let's say in a crime scene. However, if it is intact, it can be easily determined. So next is we have determination of race. So there are only three groups to which a skeleton can be assigned. These are Caucasian, Negro, and Mongolian. So this is the Caucasian. So for Caucasian, they have longer rounded or square scales or skulls, straight faces, narrow protruding noses, and triangular shape of eye sockets. Caucasians also have in their femur, kung makaka-recover ng femur, a forward curve. So next is for the Negro, shorter, narrower skulls, wider, flatter nose, longer arms and legs. Also, yung femur ng Negro ay straight. Also, kung mapapansin nyo dito sa picture, mas prominent yung dito sa may jaw area niya compared dun sa Caucasian. And lastly is the Mongolian. Prominent cheekbones, the width of the face exceeds the width of the head. So dito yung cheekbones nila yung pinaka mapapansin mo, and compared sa Negro, yung jaw nila is parang mas forward, mas inside, mas naka-push inside compared sa nakalabas. So next is determination of age. So for the determination of age, there are three ways it is determined. First is to sa teeth. Next is skull and long bones and bone density. So for teeth, it is estimated using bones is more accurate for younger subjects than it is for mature subjects. So na-mention din to sa forensic odontology na mas madaling ma-identify through teeth kapag mas bata pa siya, kasi once na mag-mature na lahat yung ngipin niya, once na maging permanent teeth na lahat sila, mahirap na i-determine kung ano yung exact age niya. However, pag developing pa lang yung ngipin niya, mas madali siyang ma-identify. So, teeth development begins before birth and progresses through formation, appearance, and loss of baby or temporary teeth. So, we have 20 temporary teeth, and ultimately the appearance of 32 permanent teeth. The appearance of permanent teeth is also completed by the age of 17 or 18. The last teeth to appear, the wisdom teeth, typically erupts at the age of 18. Next is the skull. So, in adults, the skull is of little use of age estimation. So, same sila sa teeth na mahirap na siyang ma-identify or mahirap na malaman yung age niya kapag nag-mature na. Pero pag developing pa lang siya, mas madali siyang makapag-determine ng age niya. The skulls of infants are actually of several pieces. With time, the pieces fuse together along jagged lines of separation known as suture lines. So, kung napapansin niyo sa mga babies, 'di ba yung ulo nila is malambot and wala pa talaga sila dong parang bones na nakalagay. So, ang skull kasi natin habang tumatanda, onti-onti siyang nagfo-fuse and onti-onti din siyang tumitigas. Kaya determine natin through skull, lalo na pagbata, makikita natin dun yung pinaka-development nung sa may ulo nila. So, lastly is determination of age through long bones of legs and arms and bone density. The growth plates within the long bones remain open as they grow but close up when growth stops. Bones complete their growth at the age of 25, so that these changes may help in determining the age younger than 25. And for bone density, as a person ages, his bones lose calcium and become less dense, and this can be shown through an X-ray. So, yung growth plates na to is, if you look at the picture of the 3 years old, um, makikita mo dun sa kamay niya na may parang spaces in between the bones. and may parang maliit na bone na katabi ng malaking bone like ito. So, ayan yung sinasabi nating growth plate. Ang growth plate is para siyang cartilage. And habang tumatanda tayo, unti-unti siyang ah, unti-unti siyang parang nagfo-fuse dun sa pinaka-bone natin hanggang sa mag-fully develop na tayo. So, now I'll be moving the presentation to my group mate, which is Miss Vivian Domingo.
This is Vivian Renee M. Domingo from BFSC 3A, and after my groupmate Margaret Maranya discussed the first three common examination of the skeleton, let's go now to the next kind of examination, which is the determination of height and build. So the bones of the legs and arms can help provide an estimate of height. We have here the term called allometry, or the technique of estimating the height by the use of measurements of long bones. We have here two components, which are the femur and tibia. The femur is the upper leg bone, while on the other hand is the tibia, the long bone of the lower leg. The femur and the tibia provide the best and most accurate estimates of the height. The thickness of bones may indicate a muscular build. Thicker bones indicate thicker muscles. Also, thickness of the long bones may also reveal right or left-handedness. So pag kaliwete yung tao, mas may stronger or may mas makapal silang mga buto sa left side nila. So the determination of height and build using bones is the technique that forensic anthropologists use because long bone length, the femur, tibia, humerus, is proportional to height. But there are times that this will also depend to some extent on race. Since this is inexact, there are confidence intervals assigned to each calculation. So iba-ibang buto pwedeng as my groupmate has discussed earlier, merong determination of a race and origin since magkakaiba yung structure or magkakaiba yung average measure ng iba't ibang lahi. So, pwedeng hindi pare-parehas yung calculation na mangyari based on the different race of the skeleton that has been discovered. So for the next examination we have is the determination of plurality or missing bones. So here, if the number of bones is more than the normal, we can conclude that there are more than one person died and were placed in a common grave as in a massacre. Or it may indicate congenital anomalies like polydactyly. So pag naman sobra yung nakitang mga buto sa isang area or nakakita ng human remains, pwede nating i-conclude na baka hindi lang isang tao yung nagmamay-ari nung skeleton na yon. Or baka naman pag sobra yung bones na nakita natin, pwedeng may congenital anomalies like polydactyly uh, yung taong nagmamay-ari nung human remains. Pwedeng may extra finger sila, kaya sobra yung bones na nakita natin, or pwedeng extra bones sa anumang parte ng katawan. Pag naman missing parts of a skeleton, it can give rise to the suspicion that the skeleton has been altered by animal attack or some other means. So kung yung kanina may sobra, pwede rin namang makakita ng skeleton or human remains na kulang. Pag naman kulang, hindi naman malabong may mga wild animals na nag-alter or kumuha na ng ibang buto ng tao, lalo na pag matagal nang nakaimbak or nakalibing yung skeleton dun sa area. Or pwede rin namang hindi animal, pwede ring tao yung dahilan kung bakit kulang yung human remains or skeleton na nakita dun sa isang lugar. Pwedeng sinadyang kunin or para may pagtakpan or para hindi na ma-identify kung kaninong buto yung natagpuang human remains. So on to the next one, which is the determination of antemortem or post-mortem injuries. So first, let's differentiate what antemortem is and post-mortem injuries. So antemortem injuries are those injuries a body has received before death. So pwede tong makakontribute dun sa factor dun sa pagkamatay or pwedeng ito rin yung mismong dahilan. On the other hand, pwede rin namang nag-occur na yung injuries na to many years ago. So during an autopsy, the pathologist assesses the age of antemortem injuries as well as distinguishing them from postmortem injuries, which is yung postmortem, ito naman yung injuries na nangyari after death. Postmortem injury can come from various sources, such as deliberate mutilation of a body by a murderer following a homicide, predation by wild animals, or careless handling in the mortuary. Postmortem injuries can cause confusion over the manner and cause of death. So kung yung antemortem na injuries ay before death, yung postmortem ay after, pwedeng yung dalawang uri ng injuries na to ay magdulot ng confusion kung ano talaga yung cause of death. Kasi pwedeng ang ante-mortem injuries lang naman ay ito, pero dahil dun sa post-mortem injuries, malilito yung pathologist or yung nag-autopsy kung ano nga ba yung main factor or main reason kung bakit namatay yung isang tao. So, one major difference between an antemortem and a postmortem injury is the presence of signs of bleeding. While the person is still alive, the blood is circulating and any injuries such as cuts or stabs will bleed. Recent research has focused on improved techniques for distinguishing between an antemortem and postmortem injury by analyzing damaged tissue. Antemortem injuries show signs of inflammation, while postmortem injuries do not. So here on the picture, you can see different kinds of x-rays of a bone or bones because fractured bones heal, the evidence of which can be seen by way of callus formation in the area of injury. Antemortem fractures exhibit callus formation, while postmortem fractures show no callus formation. Skull fracture that shows no signs of healing may have occurred around the time of death and may be related to the cause of death itself. Well, a well-healed fracture cannot be directly related to the cause of death. So for the next examination, which is the evidence of a gender, a skeleton's overall size and sturdiness give some clues. Within the same population, males tend to have larger, more robust bones and joint surfaces, and more bone development at muscle attachment sites. However, the pelvis is the best sex related skeletal indicator because of distinct features adapted for childbearing. So, pag may discovered human remains, isa sa pamamaraan kung paano makilala or paano ma-distinguish or ma-differentiate kung babae o lalaki yung may-ari nung skeleton na yon ay ang pelvis because as I have said, this is the best sex-related skeletal indicator because it has distinct features for adapted for childbearing. So distinct features adapted for childbearing distinguish adult females from males. Other bones in the skull also have features that can indicate sex, though less reliably, um, because in young children, these sex related features are less obvious and more difficult to interpret. Subtle sex differences are detectable in younger skeletons, but they become more defined following puberty and sexual um, maturation. So, mas mahirap i-identify yung mga human remains or skeleton pag young children since hindi pa fully developed yung mga buto nila. Unlike pag na-reach na yung puberty or adult na talaga, mas kitang-kita yung difference or distinct features ng kada bone structure ng isang tao. So here I have some examples of the different evidence of gender. We have here the pelvic bone because the pelvic tells the story. Here you can see a picture between the two pelvic bones of a female and a male. As you can see, if you can compare, the female pelvic bone has a broader sciatic notch and a raised auricular surface, while on the other hand, the male pelvic bone has a narrower sciatic notch and a flat auricular surface. So dun pa lang may dalawang pagkakaiba. Kung makikita nyo, mas open and mas circular yung form ng female pelvic bone kesa dun sa male pelvic bone. So for the next example is the skull. Here is the picture of a male skull. And as you can see, the male skull is generally larger than female. It has a larger brow ridges with sloping, less rounded forehead, and it has a greater definition of muscle attachment areas on the back of the head. Also, it has a larger projections behind the ears, or what we call the mastoid processes, and the male skull has a square chin with a more vertical or acute angle of the jaw. You can see here the larger brow ridge and sloping forehead, the developed ridge where neck muscles attach, the mastoid process, and the acute angle of the jaw, and the square chin. So, on the other hand, when we look on the female skull here, the picture, as you can see here, the female skull has a smoother bone surfaces where muscle attach. So it has a less pronounced brow ridges with more vertical forehead and sharp upper margins of the eye orbits. We can also see here the smaller projections behind the ears or the mastoid processes, and the chin is more pointed with a larger obtuse angle of the jaw. So kung kanina sa male skull ay acute angle of the jaw, dito naman sa female skull is obtuse angle. Kung meron namang um, larger brow ridges yung mga lalaki with less rounded forehead, dito sa mga babae ay more vertical forehead siya. So, doon pa lang makukumpara mo na kung yung skeletal or human remains ay uh, female or male. Kasi marami silang distinct differences or distinct features na malalaman pa lang natin na, babae ito lalaki. Doon pa lang sa formation ng bone structure nila, specifically doon sa skull. So, for the next slide, here are some examples pa to determine uh, the gender from a human remain. So here are some examples of the evidence of gender na pwede natin makita sa human remain or skeleton. We have here the pelvic inlet, or as I have discussed earlier, the pelvic bone. Sa male, mas narrower or heart-shaped, while sa female, mas open or circular yung shape na makikita natin dun sa pelvic inlet. Dun naman sa sciatic notch, sa male, narrower, sa female, broader. Yun yung short term or palatandaan kung babae o lalaki yung makikita natin dun sa sciatic notch. Dun naman sa pubic bones, in male, narrower subpubic angle where the two bones meet, while on the female, wider subpubic angle where the two bones meet. For the last example is the hip bone. In short word, the hip bone of the female is more outwardly flared. So, kung mapapansin natin lahat ng palatandaan sa bones, mas palaging open or broader yung bones ng babae kesa sa lalaki. Kasi ang babae ay, yung katawan ay nakadesign para mag-bear ng child. So, yung structure ng bones ay mas broader talaga or mas open kesa dun sa bone structure ng mga lalaki. So after discussing the different examination of the human remains or skeleton, we will now go to my assigned sample case since every member of our group prepared one case that involved discovered human remains or skeleton here in our country. So for my case, the killing of Eduardo Tolosa Jr., the CEO of Iriseth Pharma Incorporation. So, police have discovered what they suspect to be human skeletal remains of the chief executive officer of a pharmaceutical company who went missing in Bonifacio Global City in Taguig, July 19, 2022 last year. So, investigators from the Philippine National Police headquarters at Camp Crame visited the site where the remains were found in Barangay San Juan, Santa Tomas City in Batangas on last year, August 2022. So sa BJC siya nawala pero yung suspected human remains or skeleton ni Eduardo Tolosa Jr. ay natagpuan pa sa Santo Tomas City, Batangas. And upon investigating this case, the PNP said that just before he disappeared, the CEO met up with his personal assistant who gave him 5.7 million in cash and two branded watches. The people behind the kidnapping and murder of a chief executive officer of a pharmaceutical company in Marikina City burned his corpse for 3 days in a farm in Santo Tomas, Batangas in an effort to hide their crime. So kaya pala sa BGC siya nawala tapos sa Santo Tomas natagpuan yung skeleton or human remains niya is because sinunog siya 3 days straight para pagtakpan ng suspect yung krimen. So because of this is the reason that the PNP forensic group was not able to recover DNA profiles from what appeared to be human skeletal remains that were recovered in Barangay San Juan. So dahil nga isa rin yan sa factor na 3 days straight sinunog yung corpse, nahirapan na yung PNP forensic group na i-determine or mag-recover pa kung sino or yung DNA profile mismo nung skeleton. But it has been confirmed, it is only confirmed because according to the spokesperson of the Philippine National Police, one of the five suspects who surrendered and admitted that they burned the Los's body upon the orders of the alleged mastermind, which is Carlo Cadampog. So kahit medyo nahirapan yung PNP forensic group na i-determine yung DNA profile nung natagpo ang buto-buto, na-confirm lang na ito na nga yung nawawalang CEO ng isang company na si Eduardo Tolosa Jr. nung one of the five suspects admitted to the crime. So sabi nga bago i-confirm na si Eduardo Tolosa Jr. talaga natagpo ang human remains, sabi ng isang police officer, hindi pa nila sure if yung natagpuan nilang buto ay from a person or an animal. Since as we have discussed earlier, there are some similarities with the structures, with the bone structure of an animal or a person. So pag may mga ganito nga, um, importanteng i-determine muna if ito ay nanggaling ba sa tao or baka naman sa hayop. So, ito yung ginawa ng PNP Forensic Group na ayun nga, they admit na they encountered some difficulties since ang factor ay 3 days sinunog yung corpse. So, they weren't able to recover exact DNA profile from this. And this is one of the sample cases that we have prepared. And the last one will be discussed by Carmelita Joy Masilungan. And the next case that we will show you will be discussed by Margaret Maranya.
Skeletal remains found at DOJ excavation site. Skeletal remains were recovered at an excavation site at the Department of Justice compound in Padre Faura, Manila on November 24, 2022. So, ang nangyari kasi dito is, ang DOJ at the time ay in-excavate nila yung area na yan kasi magpapatayo sila ng, I think it was a 4-story building. And nung in-excavate nila yung site for the foundation ng building, may nakita sila sa malapit sa surface na may mga buto or skeleton. And Nung ni-recover nila yon, nakita nila na estimate nila na about 3 to 5 skeletons or 3 to 5 na tao yung amount ng mga skeletons na yun. And ang ginawa ng DOJ, binigay nila sa NBI yung mga skeletal remains up after nilang ma-recover kasi wala daw means ang DOJ kung paano ba i-handle yung examination ng skeletal remains. And at the same time, na-discover din kasi nila na yung skull nung sa mga skeletal remains ay may parang bullet hole kaya nila binigay sa NBI. And another um, parang key factor din dito sa incident na to was kino-question nila yung origin of the skeletal remains kasi nga it was discovered at the Department of Justice. And wala ako nakitang other sources on indicating talaga or have a concrete answer kung saan nanggaling talaga itong mga skeletal remains na to. Ang pinaka nakita ko lang is an answer from Mr. Remula nung in-interview din siya about the origin of the skeletal remains. And ang sabi niya is, ang sabi sa akin, history talaga dito. When that was dug up, meron ding nahanap dyan eh. It can be part of the war, we don't know. Remember, during the war, wasak lahat to, everything was destroyed. So, dun sa first sentence, ang sinasabi ni Mr. Remula kasi dito ay itong incident kasing to, hindi siya first time for DOJ. Nung 2005, naka-discover din ng skeletal remains nung nag-excavate din sila dun sa building ng DOJ. And for the second part, sinasabi lang niya dito na yung mga skeletal remains na to ay possibly noon pa siya at hindi siya recent. Ang sinasabi niya dito is there's a chance na nung mga World War pa, nung may mga gera pa nang galing tong mga skeletal remains na to kasi nga nung mga panahon na yan, madaming mga nasirang buildings, madaming naging casualties. Kaya sinasabi niya dito, wasak lahat to, everything was destroyed. Another highlight of the incident was also sinabihan ang DOJ na hindi dapat nila hinawakan yung mga skeletal remains nito. What I mean by this is itong sagot ni Mr. Clavano. She Fortune advised us the next time na makakuha natin yung ganong klaseng skeleton or remains not to touch it. Di po natin alam yun, that's why tinurn over kaagad namin sa NBI. So we will consult with her again as to what we can do and what we can find pa dito sa mga skeletons na nahanap. So, sinabihan kasi ni Miss Raquel Fortune ang DOJ na dapat hindi nila hinawakan yung mga skeletal remains na to kasi para magkaroon ng isang successful na investigation for skeletal remains, dapat kasi properly documented and properly na-recover siya. However, ang ginawa lang kasi ng DOJ based on a video was parang kinuha lang nila isa-isa and tinambak lang nila isa-isa sa isang table yung mga skeletal remains. And as for etong sa we will consult with her again, madaming reports na nag-indicate na magre-release daw ang NBI ng report nila nung Friday nung time na yon. However, wala akong nakitang mga reports on kung ano ba yung sinabi ng NBI and any other latest news upon this incident.
Good day, I am Carmelita Joy Masilungan, and now let's dig in and identify who are involved in the process. In identifying human remains, we need to use all individuals that we may possibly get information from in order to increase the chance of identifying the identity of the human remains. Information can make identification an easier process in a variety of ways, such as by interviewing of the individuals and records from professionals who are typically involved in the identification process. First is oral sources. We can gather information necessary to give conclusions or stand as circumstantial evidence. Some oral sources are by interviewing family members, friends, and witnesses. What is critical here are the information that these oral sources may give about types of information before the victim went missing.
Family members can narrow down potential matches to speed up the investigation. Friends or colleagues can aid in the identification process since most people tend to rely on friends on their daily or important actions. And witness can corroborate other pieces of evidence to draw conclusions from. So before we proceed to more details regarding oral sources, what is AMD and PMD? AMD is antemortem data or all information on the missing persons such as personal, physical, medical, and dental information as well as information on the circumstances of their disappearance or records made before the death. While PMD is postmortem data or all information obtained during postmortem examination, including detailed pathology, anthropology, and odontology data and information related to the cause of death. What we will need on oral sources are antemortem data. The PMD must then be matched with the AMD of a missing person, which must also be carried out by qualified experts. Any individual who was in contact with a missing person is a potential source of vital information, and we need antemortem data to begin with the investigation. And it includes the following types of information, which are general personal or social information such as their name, their age, home address, place of work, marital status, and many more so that the investigator have a base or information to compare to. And we gather information to family members about the individual's characteristics or physical appearance, such as the missing person's height, weight, eye color, or hair color, and also their distinguishing features, such as their habits, if they are smoking or not, or their unique characteristics like scars, birthmarks, or tattoos. And also, we can ask family members about medical and dental history of the person, like if they had fractures, diseases, missing teeth, or dental crowns. And the personal belongings or clothes and other personal items the missing person was wearing or carrying when he or she was last seen. And the investigators can ask about any circumstances related to the disappearance. As much as family is an important source of information, friends can contribute as much information as well that a family member may not know, such as what are the habits of that person, where do they always go, or their usual hangout places, their recent activities, or the things that they always do, or and who are the people they usually go with, or their social circles. And now, witnesses who may have seen the individual before their disappearance or at the location where the remains were found can provide information about the circumstances surrounding the disappearance, which is also a vital information that is needed. Then, aside from these oral sources, we can gather information or identifying human remains from the forensic specialists. After the remains have been properly recovered, they should be sent for laboratory analysis and reconciliation, which involves answering five main questions. Are the remains human or non-human? Are the remains related to the conflict, disaster situation in question? How many individuals do the recovered remains represent? Who are they? What are their identities? And what is the cause of death? The first step in laboratory analysis and reconciliation is preparing and examining the remains. This must be done by must be done by specially trained experts who gathered information on post-mortem data about the remains themselves and any circumstantial evidence. So who are these forensic specialists? First is forensic odontologist, which includes the medical and dental facts, including unique characteristics of the remains, such as signs of old bone fractures or evidence of surgery, condition of the teeth, and presence of any dental work, such as fillings and other information. Forensic odontologists are highly experienced, specially trained dentists who use their expertise to identify unknown remains and trace bite marks to a specific individual. They can extract DNA from the pulp chamber to cross-match and identify a victim. Investigators can examine dental records to match them to a corpse or to match a bite mark to a perpetrator. And we can also collect information using records from odontologists or the maintenance of legible dental records such as clinical photographs, patient details, digital dental impressions, cast models, radiographs, pathological reports, and many will assist legal authorities in identification of human remains. Then next is forensic anthropologists. When human remains or a suspected burial are found, forensic anthropologists are called upon to gather information from the bones and their recovery context to determine who died, how they died, and how long ago they died. Forensic anthropologists specialize in analyzing hard tissues such as bones, and what forensic anthropologists do is doing the big four, which are identifying the age, sex, race, and stature. For example, as we can determine if it is a young person by the length of the bones. We can determine the age by the epiphysis of the sternal end of the clavicle since, for example, it fuses around the age of 30. While gender can be readily or are readily identified by examining the pubis bone, wider on females than males. And however, race is much more complex issues. The race are becoming less and less distinct as the planet's population moves toward a multiracial citizenry. For that reason, racial identification these days is kept to the basics: white, black, Asian, or Native American, based on distinctive characteristics of the skeleton, regardless of what the person's skin may have looked like. While on the other hand, determining stature is a matter of applying a mathematical equation called a regression equation to the measurement of the femur, which is the longest bone in the body. This data is combined with a similar measurement of the tibia or lower shin bone to provide a very accurate estimation of height. Then now, forensic pathologists. Forensic pathologists examine the remains to determine the cause and manner of death, which may provide additional clues for identification. They can also collect samples for DNA analysis. Forensic pathologists are responsible for the collection of data derived from the physical examination of human remains recovered from mass fatality incidents for the purpose of scientific identification and determination of cause and manner of death. Forensic pathologists begin by conducting a thorough examination of the human remains. They carefully assess the condition of the body and any associated evidence such as clothing, personal belongings, or documents found at the scene. They examine the remains for any signs of injury, trauma, disease, or other factors that may have led to the individual's death. This information can provide critical clues for identification. They determine the manner of death, which can be classified into categories such as homicide, suicide, accident, natural, or undetermined. This determination helps guide the investigative process and may provide context for the circumstances surrounding the individual's death. There are still a lot, uh, there are still a lot of forensic specialists who are essential on identifying remains on an investigation. These are just some of them, but they are all important that can aid in investigation. And now let's move on to a case sample. I know that many of you are familiar with the case of Jovelyn Galeno case. Jovelyn Galeno is a 22-year-old Filipina who used to work as a sales lady at Robinson's Place, Palawan, a mall located in Puerto Princesa City, Palawan. On August 5, 2022, she was reported missing by her sister Jonalyn. According to Jonalyn, Jovelyn was last seen around 6 p.m. when she left the mall after finishing her shift. The employer of Jovelyn, Robinson's Place, Palawan, confirmed that she left the premises after her working hours at approximately 6:30 p.m. However, there is no hard copy of the video surveillance footage showing her departure from the mall, and the mall management only released a video recording of Jovelyn entering the mall but lacks evidence of her leaving. In Palawan on August 23, the authorities made a disturbing discovery when they found the remains of 22-year-old Jovelyn Galeno, who had been missing for several weeks. During the investigation of a stabbing incident, one of the cousins, identified as Dasmariñas, reportedly confessed to the location of Jovelyn Galeno and provided crucial information about what had transpired. Acting upon this information, the authorities initiated a search in the specified area, leading to the recovery of Galeno's belongings along her skeletal remains. A DNA test was conducted to ensure the accurate identification of the skeleton belonging to Jovelyn Galeno. The results revealed in an astonishing 99.9% between the DNA sample extracted from the skeleton and a swab sample obtained from Galeno's mother. However, despite the compelling DNA evidence, some of Jovelyn Galeno's relatives have voiced doubts regarding the discovery. They argue that the underwear found alongside the skeletal remains does not belong to Jovelyn, and they question the presence of the skeleton itself, considering her short 3-week disappearance. Nevertheless, the DNA test results strongly support the conclusion that the remains indeed belong to Jovelyn Galeno. As the investigation into her case continues, the two cousins against whom the complaint was filed are likely to face charges of rape and homicide based on the evidence presented and Dasmariñas' alleged confession. In this case, we will focus on the recovered remains of Jovelyn Galeno, apparently dumped in open field and already in a skeletal stage of decomposition. So, is it possible? Since some doctors, however, said on the social media that they didn't believe the skeletal remains were those of Jovelyn because it's not possible for a human body to change into that state in only 2 weeks. And according to Dr. Eunice Herrera in a Facebook post, from a doctor's point of view, who at the same time acts as a medical legal officer who conducted numerous autopsy, wala pong ganito kabilis na 2 weeks lang bungo at kalansay na agad. She said that may certain days, weeks, and months bago nadidecay ang body kahit pa i-consider natin ang weather condition ngayon na ulan-init. And kung si Jovelyn talaga yung bangkay, dapat nasa stage of decomposition pa lang yan since 2 weeks pa lang naman nawawala. And Dr. Fee Atencio also shared the same thoughts in a separate post. He states educated uh, he states that we should are he should educate the public about stages of decomposition and said skeletonization would start several weeks to years depending on weather and condition. In cold weather, mas matagal maagnas, lalo at tag-ulan ngayon dito sa Puerto Princesa and mas mabilis ang decomposition pag binaon sa lupa because organisms would help breaking down the remains. So still, that was the conclusion in the case, and it's important for the public to be aware and educated about this matter so we won't be a victim of unjust situation. So, for you, do you think it is Jovelyn Galeno or not? Or are you going to believe that it is the skeletal remains of Jovelyn Galeno based on the DNA result, which is the 99.9%?